tell you what, Ken, my mother would have appreciated that, but my father would have gotten a good laugh. But look, it's fantastic to come to Horry County, where you guys, did you ever talk about corruption or inefficient government? Is that right? Everything's great here. But look, I got a rule before I tell you, before I get started. I never eat before I speak. But I'm kind of hungry watching you guys eat, so if I gloss over a lot of stuff and I go real fast, it's because I want to get a plate while Kevin Brackett's talking. Seriously though, it's great to be in Myrtle Beach. It's appropriate that I'm here on December the 6th because it was exactly 11 months ago at the start of this year in Greenville that I spoke in front of several hundred Greenville GOPers, several hundred Republicans in Greenville. Think about that. An elected Democrat went and spoke with over 300 Greenville GOPers, and I made it out of there alive. So, but all I heard was, well, Pascoe, you've never been to Horry. I said, okay, well, I came to Horry, but this time I did bring some backup. I brought my sheriff to get me out of here. And with all due respect, Sheriff from Horry, you both are the best sheriffs in the state, okay? You got to stick up for my man, Leroy. But we're going to get along tonight. Because the one thing that is bipartisan is corruption and inefficient government is a bipartisan problem. And the only way we're going to combat it is through a bipartisan effort. We need civil debate in our state about our problems and changes in our system. And we need to make those changes soon. Because justice in South Carolina is only possible when it's in the hearts and minds of every South Carolinian. The only way it's going to be in the hearts of every South Carolinian is for public officials to speak up for a change. And that's why I am so grateful that my really good friend of over 20 years, Solicitor Kevin Brackett, is here tonight, and Sheriff Tolson from York County. That's how it's going to be in the hearts and minds of everybody. And what we intend to do tonight is that we're going to expose some of the issues that we have in our state, but we're also going to discuss solutions to our problems in the state. We're not just going to come up here and complain and yell out the window, I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it anymore. We're also coming here to talk about some solutions. Now, after speaking in Greenville this past January, I also have the opportunity to speak in Newberry, in Somerville. But I made the decision in March to stop putting on this presentation. And I did that because I knew that political filings were starting to share and the silly season was about to start. And I didn't want to get accused of being political. And that's why I was out there speaking when people were running campaigns. But on March the 1st, I got what I thought was a pretty important phone call. It was from a legislative House leader, somebody that was in House leadership. And his exact quote to me, and I wrote it down, because I document, believe it or not, almost every conversation I have with a legislator or a judge, I like to document it. And his first words out of his mouth were, David, what is going on? Are you trying to take down the entire damn system? What are you looking to do? And my response to him was, I'm tired of complaining about our system. And more importantly, I'm tired of hearing people and lawyers and members of the bar and judges complain about our system. So all I'm attempting to do is expose it by talking about it. It's up to the people to take it down and change the system. But I'm going to keep talking, and I'm going to keep exposing problems with our system as long as people want to hear it, whether they're Republicans, Democrats, liberals, conservatives, libertarians, I don't care. I'm going to continue to talk. Because not only am I tired, ladies and gentlemen, but I'm worried. I believe that we're at a tipping point in South Carolina. Violent crime is reaching an all-time high. Specifically, murders are at its highest level in 30 years. Chief Marquis led, and all these sheriffs have been banging this drum for several years now. The murder rate is climbing at an incredible number. We're at a tipping point because we have a criminal docket that is becoming unmanageable, and I worry about a system that's failing victims, failing defendants, and everyone, because it's often said, justice delayed is democracy denied. Exactly a decade ago, let me tell you all something. Exactly a decade ago, almost to the day, the state Supreme Court found that our criminal docketing statute was unconstitutional, and they gave complete control of the docket to the courts 10 years ago. And in the last decade, the docket has continued to expand. We've actually brought in more cases than we moved. That's the easy way of explaining it. We have brought in more cases than we moved. And I do not blame the courts. I do not blame the solicitors or the defense bar. I blame the legislature. Constitutionally, it is the legislature's job to create a docketing statute in the state of South Carolina. It's in the state constitution. And for 10 years, they have failed to do so. And why and how they failed, you may ask? Well, I'm going to tell you another story. About 3 years ago, the solicitors, the public defenders, and the Trial Lawyers Association, along with Justice James, who's on the Supreme Court, got together, and we came up with a solution. We came up with a docketing statute for the legislature to pass. Now, let me repeat that and prove it. The 16 elected solicitors, the public defenders, and the trial lawyers all agreed on something. I mean, that's your Christmas miracle right there, okay? We agreed on that docket. We got bipartisan support for it, that docket bill, and we took it over to the Senate. And we thought for sure it was going to pass. But the bill didn't pass. In fact, it didn't even come up for a vote because this state senator, a Democrat from down the street in Chesterfield, Darlington area, Senator Malloy, Democrat. He threatened to filibuster the docketing bill, and it never came up for a vote. Why did he threaten to filibuster? Why did not enough senators go along with killing that filibuster to vote on it? I'm going to tell you something that nobody else knows about except for some solicitors and a few other people. While myself and some of my brethren and other solicitors were up to the Senate supporting the bill, another state senator who supported the bill, who was a lawyer legislator, came up to the solicitors and said, I have to change my vote. I'm not going to be able to support the document bill. And they asked, why? Trial lawyers supported, you're a trial lawyer, Senator. Solicitors supported public defenders. And the senator showed their phone to the solicitors, and there was a text message from the Chief Justice of the State Supreme Court asking them not to support the bill. Now, and I like the Chief Justice a lot personally. I do. And I will talk to you about that in a minute too. But can you imagine that? I mean, that's what we have to end. The intermingling. That was intermingling with the judiciary and the legislature. You have 3 branches of government. They're supposed to be separate. But can you imagine Chief Justice Roberts texting or calling Senator Tim Scott and saying, kill a bill? No. We've got to end it. But in South Carolina, what we're going to talk about, our judiciary is anything but independent. It's not an independent branch of government. And an independent judiciary is crucial to our republic, and it's crucial to our separation of powers. But a judiciary cannot be independent when they are selected, elected, fired, we'll talk about that tonight, and totally funded by another branch of government. Specifically by lawyer legislators who practice law in their courtrooms. And we're going to talk about that tonight. I came across a great quote the other day that I wanted to share with you, which is that the law in all its majestic equality forbids the rich as well as the poor to sleep under the bridges of paradise. Now I know I don't need to tell y'all what the meaning of that quote is, but my good friend Jimmy Richardson is from Ainer, South Carolina. So I'm going to explain it to my friend Jimmy. Is that okay with y'all? Anybody else from Ainer? I'm sorry. Gosh, y'all. Y'all know what it means. It means that equality in our justice system, in our courts, should never depend, nor does it, on the color of someone's skin, on their gender, on their ethnicity, or their wealth, but it also should not depend on whether a litigant has the ability to hire a lawyer, legislator, or not. Because the system for because the system for everyone else is unfair in the state of South Carolina. How is it an independent judiciary when a lawyer legislator goes in front of the judge who literally, in some cases, days later, that judge has to go in front of that judicial legislator on the Judicial Merit Selection Committee to see if there's still going to be a judgment. Not to mention, we all know the stories of House members attempting to get spouses and siblings appointed magistrates by state senators, and how legislators, Republican and Democrat, this is bipartisan, they have their spouses, their daughters, their siblings, their former law partners, their cousins, and their best friends elected to the bench. I mean, there's got to be a better way. But let me make something perfectly clear. This is where I get, like I said, I like a lot of these people. Chief Justice is a great guy. I think he's a darn good justice. And I'm sure I speak for Kevin Brackett when I say this too. I do not have an agenda towards any individual. Before I go forward and start mentioning more names, I do not have an individual, a grievance against an individual. I do not dislike or hate anyone, but I do loathe the system that we're in. But it's like the old saying, don't hate the player, hate the game. We can't elaborate on the game and tell y'all stories about the game unless we mention some of the players. I don't hate them. I don't think that all of them are corrupt, but the system is right, and we can change. First thing we need to do, and do I really even need to elaborate on next week?
Yes.
We've got we've got to end senatorial appointment of magistrates. What we have all personally observed with decisions and bonds for felons is far too often bordering on the absurd. And it is so bad, maybe you guys will remember this, it is so bad in South Carolina that one of the things, remember in the gubernatorial election back this fall, one of the things that Governor Henry McMaster and Joe Cunningham agreed on is that we had to change the way we pick magistrates in South Carolina. That's how bad it is. They both agreed on that. And I'm asking that Governor McMaster continue to push for change when it comes to how we pick our magistrates. Next, the Judicial Merit Selection Committee. And this is what I'm going to spend the remainder of my time on tonight, which is how judges get elected in South Carolina. Other than probate judges, summary court judges like magistrates and municipal court judges, all of our judges in South Carolina are elected by the
Legislature.
Very good, the legislature. And those candidates are first screened and selected by the Judicial Merit Selection Committee, correct?
Absolutely.
And I'm going to call it the JMSC sometimes, for short. The JMSC is arguably the most important process in the entire picking of a judge. In fact, it is the most important process because they're the ones who decide which judges are qualified or which candidates are qualified and which ones actually get to run. Okay? They are by far the most important part of the process. As I'm going to discuss in more detail in a minute, the JMSC has 10 members. A majority of the members, 6 of them, are legislators. 3 from the Senate, 3 from the House. And even the other 4 who are lawyers but not lawyer legislators, those other 4, they're also appointed by the House and Senate, 2 from the House and 2 from the Senate. So all 10 members are appointed by the legislature, okay, including the 6 lawyer legislators that are on the committee. I mean, it's sort of like that quote, y'all remember from Winston Churchill, where he once said that democracy is the worst form of government except for all others tried. Well, the way we pick judges in South Carolina is the worst way to pick a judge, period. Okay, compared to all others tried. There's other bad ways out there in other states, I know, but none of them are as bad as the way we pick judges in South Carolina. And whether we get rid of the JMSC or change who the members are, we have got to do something to at least curb lawyer, legislator influence over our judges. A little later, Solicitor Brackett's going to go into more detail about better options on how we pick judges and how other states do it. And let me be clear about this. I'm not here to rail against all judges. You know, we have some great judges in this state. A lot of great public servants. Just like anything. We got bad lawyers, good lawyers. You know, bad judges, great judges. But I'm not here to rail against judges. In fact, they should be standing up here with me. Because what I'm advocating for is for them to be an independent branch of government and not have to look over their shoulders to make sure they're not offending a legislator to get reelected. South Carolina judiciary today is hired by the legislature, paid solely by the legislature, can be fired by the legislature. The operation of the judiciary is financed entirely, of course, by the legislature. The judiciary arguably becomes an employee of the legislature and not a co-equal branch of government. And we have got to change that in South Carolina. Now, the next slide, y'all see that? All right. This is actually an old slide. It's one I used back in January and February. Because Myrtle Smith is on it and Luke Rankin. Myrtle Smith was the chairman of the JMSC, and Luke Rankin, senator from up around here, he was the vice chair of the JMSC. Now, the reason I kept it up there is to tell you all a quick story that a couple months ago, we were all having a conversation. Solicitor Brackett, Sheriff Tolson, Sheriff Ravenel was on, a bunch of people, and other solicitors. We were talking about how Myrtle Smith was going to become Speaker of the House. And one of the sheriffs from the upstate said, well, that's great, at least he's not on JMSC anymore. I said, dude, do you know who appoints the members on the JMSC from the House? The Speaker of the House. And everybody just started laughing, because you can't help but do anything but laugh. So he still picks, even though he's not on the JMSC, he picks the members that are in the JMSC from the House.
That would be Luke Rankin that picks it, right?
In the Senate, from the Senate, you're absolutely right. Because I think the judiciary chair, picks those three. From the House, they're picked by the Speaker of the House, and that is now also. That's right. And the Senate also picks two, I think, lawyers that are not legislators, and the House picks two also. So they're all picked by the legislature. They control them, right? They control them. Especially when you make sure that 6 of the 10 are actually legislators. So if you, for some reason, had 4 rogue non-legislative, well, they're going to still lose every time, 64. But here are the current members. Y'all probably can't see them. Now the vice chair is Micah Caskew. I'll probably give y'all Ken, Linda, my PowerPoint if y'all want to share it with me next week. Okay. And now what I'm going to do, the most important part is I'm going to highlight a couple of troubling cases involved in the Judicial Merit Selection Committee over the last several years. I have spoken to more than several current and former judges about their experiences with lawyer legislators and with the JMSC. And more than several, and I made sure to document every single one of those conversations. Now, most of them are not going to go on the record. In fact, some of them who wanted to meet with me, one in particular recently, they reached out to me and said, David Pascoe, you got to hear what I went through. I want to meet with you. Can I meet with you tomorrow? Sure, come to my Orangeburg office the next morning. They canceled because they're worried about repercussions. And I get it. I understand it. They're in the practice of law. And I'm not going to talk about their cases tonight, the people that don't want me to come forward and go public. But I'm going to talk about others. But I do want the world to know this. I want to be put under oath in front of some type of committee, like a Senate committee up in Columbia, South Carolina, to investigate JMSC. And if I'm ever put under oath, I will tell everything I know, including what those other judges have told me about the experiences they went through and how I corroborate what they told me. I'm calling on, because I believe we have some honorable men and women in the South Carolina Senate. I really do. I know some of them, many of them. And I'm calling on Senator Alexander, who's President Pro Tem of the Senate. I'm calling on Katrina Shealy from Lexington County, who has spoken out against the way how we pick judges in the state. I'm calling on Democrats like Dick Harpootlian, who just likes to talk a lot. An old friend of mine, so you know, I tease him. But he does. No, but he's a loose candidate, and I like that. And I'm calling on young new senators like Brian Adams, Republican from Berkeley, Charleston area, to demand hearings on how we select judges in this state and what judges have to go through and lawyers have to go through to become judges. And you know what? If Pascoe's wrong, if we find out that the JMSC is a great, ethical, wonderful thing, I'll be the first to apologize and say, keep it. Okay? Keep it. What do we have to lose? Let's lay out all the truth. Let's talk about how we pick judges in public, not in executive session. in public, and let the people decide, let the legislature decide. Now, tonight, I have gotten permission to tell the story about two former judges. The first one I'm going to talk about is Judge Christy Herring. She was a judge from 2008 to 2018. All right? She was known as a no-nonsense, hard-nosed judge. She worked long hours, and she was a pretty tough sentence, very tough sentence. When she was up for re-election, because she'd already been elected at least twice, so she was up for re-election in the fall of 2017, really into 2018. She was found well qualified by the Citizens Committee. She was unopposed. Nobody was even running against her. And she was repeatedly told by the Judicial Merit Selection Committee lawyer that she was fine. She had nothing to worry about because she was unopposed and no formal complaints were filed against her. This is in August of 2017. Remember that time. Okay? Honestly, the only bad thing I can think of about Christy Herring, because I know, is that she was president of the Berkeley County Republican Women, vice president of the state Republican Women, and she was a Republican delegate or something, whatever. So, as y'all can agree with me.
Pascoe, what you got against women?
You caught that, huh?
I did.
But as you can imagine, all that Republican, you can see why Republicans like Luke Rankin and Earl Smith would be opposed to her so much, right? I mean, come on. You can't even laugh at that. I mean, that's unbelievable. They didn't support it. So, but seriously, a friend of mine, a friend of Kevin and I, actually, both of us, said to me last week, she said, David, we don't even have a two-party system in South Carolina. It's all about pocketbooks and wallets. All about pocketbooks and wallets. Which reminds me of something that Gipper once said. And I came with one Republican folks we all know, okay? It's like Gipper said, politics is the second oldest profession, but it bears a very close resemblance to the first. Man, was he right about that. I mean, next slide. I mean, think about this. This Republican and Democrat, Rankin and Malloy, they share the same political consultants. Go read their ethics reports. I don't even want to call them that, okay? Because I got most of my friends are Democrats.
Yeah,
right? But they share the same consultant. Think about that. But let's get back to Judge Herring. We've had some, but let's get back to Herring. In August of 2017, again, she's unopposed, no formal complaints, smooth sailing, right? She's been elected or re-elected a couple times. November comes along, and that's when she is going to go through JMSC, because you go through the JMSC in November, and then the election is in February, and your term starts, I think, July 1st. Okay, so she's going in front of JMSC in November. She's looking good in August. November comes along, yada, yada, yada. She has to withdraw from the race. Now, I know what y'all are saying. You say, Pascoe, yada, 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 over the best part. It's like in Seinfeld, yada, 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 over the most important part. But you're doing that because you want to hurry up and get a plate of barbecue. I know you. No, I yada, yada, yada over it because I simply want to emphasize that this is why we need hearings. Before I keep going, we need to determine why she actually withdrew from the race and why the JMSC treated her the way they did in those hearings. I mean, it was brutal. People need to be put under oath, and they need to talk about what they know and what they saw. Because there are multiple stories out there, and everyone deserves the truth. I'm going to tell you about one of the stories that nobody's reported and nobody knows about other than the insiders, those public officials and those lawyers like me that need to speak up. The reported story is that she goes before the JMSC in November and gets grilled. They forced her to withdraw because they grilled her about her demeanor on the bench, her student loans, and at one point they threatened prosecution unless she stepped down from the race. Go read the articles. State newspaper, the Post-Courier, and even Will Foltz, Fifth News. He did great articles on what Harrington had to go through when she went before JMSC. It really was. It was brutal. But let me tell you what was reported and what she believes is the reason she's unopposed. And what I would prove, even if that is not the reason she was treated the way she was by JMSC, it proves why we still need to pick judges a different way than we did. Next slide. This is Peter McCoy, Representative Peter McCoy, former Representative Peter McCoy. Really good guy. I've had a great relationship with him over the years. I am not saying he's corrupt. I don't think he is corrupt. He's the former chairman of the judiciary. He's a member of the JMSC. Good guy. Don't hate the player, Pascoe. Hate the game. That's what I keep telling myself. And you never heard the story about what happened. Nobody has with Harrington and Peter McCoy. Because again, Peter McCoy was on JMSC. He was chairman of the judiciary. And you know what other committee he was on? It starts with a J. He was on JMSC. Okay? Now, something else I got to explain to you before I tell you the rest of the story, because a lot of y'all might not know this. Remember when I was talking about how it's unfair for people to have lawyer legislators as their lawyer? Sometimes. That's because lawyer legislators get absolute protection from having to go to court at least 7 months out of the year. From January the 1st to July the 31st, a judge cannot order a lawyer legislator to come into court or bring their client. So think about the unfairness of that. That if you're represented by a public defender or Tucker Player is your lawyer, you got to go to court when a judge tells you to go to court. But if you're represented by Luke Rankin and it's February, and even if Luke's not even in session, a judge can't tell him to bring you to court. Absolute protection. And it's not fair. It's wrong. Well, so good judges like Christy Harrington, they make sure to schedule the legislators' trials in the month of August. In September, when they're not protected, right? In August of 2017, Peter McCoy, sometime that August, was first up for trial on Monday. Christy Harrington told me that on the Friday before the trial started, McCoy asked Harrington to continue his trial. Prosecutor objected. Prosecutor objected. He didn't have good grounds for a continuance in her opinion. He didn't have legislative protection, so she denied his motion for a continuance and told him you got to come to court next week. This is the important part. It doesn't even matter if that JMSC ganged up against her and got rid of her because of that. We'll talk about that. But this is all that matters. That afternoon, within minutes of her telling the legislator he had to come to court, she felt like she made a mistake. And she called another judge and told that friend of hers, who's another circuit judge, I made a mistake. I think I'm going to be in trouble with JMSC in a couple months. I denied a continuance to Peter. That should never happen with a judge when you're supposed to be an independent branch of government. An independent judiciary would never have another judge even be scared and make that call to another judge to say, I think I made a mistake. But Harrington contacts her JMSC lawyer, and quickly, everybody who's a candidate, before they go in front of the JMSC, they're assigned a quote JMSC lawyer or staffer to help them out. That lawyer tells you you're fine, don't worry about it, it's on your head, no issues. But on the following Tuesday, after the Friday denial of the continuance, on the following Tuesday night, Christy Harrington told me she got a phone call from a Democratic legislator. And the Democratic legislator asked her, what did you do to upset Peter? I'm here with Myrtle and Peter, and he is unhappy. So she knew she was in trouble that Tuesday afternoon of the continuance. Again, I'm not saying that's why she's not a judge anymore, but that alone, here's my point, people, if there are others listening outside this room, that alone is why we have to change our system. A judge should not be looking over their shoulders and making decisions based on whether they tick off a legislator or not. I feel strongly that we need hearings in the Senate or somewhere, put people under oath, and let's find out what's going on. Was Judge Harrington forced to step down because of her student loans, because she was mean from the bench? Man, if that's a standard, there are a lot of judges that probably need to get out. All right? Or is it because she didn't give a lawyer legislator on JMSC what they wanted? And I know that there are going to be a lot of arguments. Like, here's one that, and I need full candor. Peter McCoy, even though he was on JMSC, he actually recused himself from JMSC in that argument. That's what I say. I say, whoopee. He's still a member. He's still a lawyer legislator. He still knows them all. and he's still got the influence, and they're going to do what the friend wants. But do you know why he recused himself? Do you know who did breeze through JMSC and become a judge that year? The same time Christie was up? His wife. You can't make that up. His wife. Now, I think Judge McCoy, I've heard nothing but good things about her. I think she might be a wonderful judge. I don't know. Never been in front of her. She might. But that's not the point. The appearance of it is horrible. It's absolutely horrible. Got to have hearings. Got to have hearings. I'll talk to you about one more example. Judge Tommy Russo, y'all may have heard that because he's kind of up from around this area, right? Tucker, Florence area, not too far from here. He was a judge from 2005 to 2020. He was up for re-election in 2019. See if this sounds familiar. He was unopposed. He had no formal complaints against him filed. He had over an 80% positive feedback rating from the bar evaluators, and he also was told by his JMSC lawyer, everything's going to be fine, easy peasy, you're going to breeze through. Sounds familiar. When I was on the phone with Judge Russo, we talked more than several times. The first time he said, quote, David, my timing could not have been worse. Just like Judge Herring, there are Post and Courier and State newspaper and Fitz News articles, and I encourage you to go back and read them. Brutal hearing he went through in November of 2019. He was accused of berating litigants, treating people unfairly, and one has to wonder, how do you go from being unopposed with an 80% approval rating or whatever it is in August and September and October, and then all of a sudden in November, they're coming at you like pigs. And that's why I wanted to talk to him. I'd heard scuttlebutt about stuff, but I wanted to talk to him. And you know what? Maybe he should have been disqualified. I don't know. Maybe he was a bad judge. I knew him personally, but I never really went in front of him. But I wanted to know what his side of the story was. Well, September of 2019, there is a huge multi-million-dollar case in front of Judge Russo, and he tries it. Great plaintiffs' lawyers on it, great civil defense lawyers on it. And in late September, the jury comes back with a I think it was like a $21 million verdict. It was a lot of money, millions and millions of dollars. And as y'all know, you can do the math on that. Tucker's getting all excited back there. He's like, man, if I had one of those, I'd have $7 million in legal. You know, that's a lot of money for plaintiffs' lawyers, right? There's a lot at stake, and I'm sure they busted their butts on that case, as did the defense lawyers. Russo didn't think much of that case. Doesn't matter to me why or what, but he didn't think much of it. He scheduled hearings for October on whether the defense should be granted a new trial and the verdict be thrown out so the plaintiff doesn't get his money and his lawyers don't get their money. Important for me to know that according to Russo and according to the documents that I've seen that corroborate what he told me, no lawyer legislators were involved in that case up until September of 2019. None. Again, I know the plaintiff's lawyers personally, great firm, defense lawyers, great firm. No lawyer legislators are involved until they have that October, mid-October, end of October hearing on whether to throw out the verdict. And guess who walks in the courtroom representing the plaintiffs and the plaintiffs' attorney? The chairman of the Judicial Merit Selection Committee is now late October. It is a month, or right at a month before Russo has to go before the JMSC. And he walks in there to argue, don't vacate that multi-million-dollar verdict, give the plaintiffs their lawyer, give the plaintiffs their lawyer. And Russo told me in our first conversation, he said, I was just thinking to myself, man, you've got to be kidding me. That's the guy I'm going in front of in a month. Russo actually has a conscience, whether you like him or not, whether he belittled people or not. And he decided to do what he thought was right. And on November the 1st, just 3 weeks, less than 3 weeks before he went before the JMSC, he ruled with his conscience and he ruled against Myrtle Smith, and he did throw out the verdict in that case. Less than 3 weeks later, he's in front of the JMSC, and Mr. Unopposed, nothing to worry about. is hammered by lawyer legislators on JMSC, and he's forced to step down in a very, very nasty, contentious area.
There weren't even any complaints on them.
The formal complaint. And that's something else that we don't have time to talk about, but when they put me under oath, I'd love to talk about that too. Because I had been told, I'm going to say, I've been told by the JMSC, if you don't file a formal complaint against this judge, then we're not allowed to talk about it. They're not even going to talk about it. Well, that's a bunch of bull, because you did that to Harrington and Lisa. Anyway. Now, in full disclosure, I did learn that Myrtle Smith did recuse himself from the JMSC that week. It doesn't sound familiar, does it? And coincidentally, I'm going to give everybody one guess. So Russo, he was forced to withdraw in November of 2019. His seat comes up in February. It's empty. Nobody's running for it because he's unopposed. So he steps down in July. Somebody else has to run for it. Here's my question. You get one guess. Guess whose cousin took Russo's seat? Myrtle Smith's cousin.
But he recused himself, didn't he?
He probably did.
No, he didn't.
Okay. He didn't give his
He
cousin.
said in the hearing he had no duty to recuse himself.
It doesn't matter.
They are above the law.
I'll cut him some slack on that, though. It doesn't matter. So anyway, there you have it. And that's why we need to make changes in South Carolina, because this dude might be a great judge. He might be a fantastic judge, but it's a perception. And we got to change the way we select judges to change that perception. I'm coming towards the end here. I'm going to breeze through these. The consequences of the system, we've really already talked about every single one of them. You know, lawyers judges having lawyer legislators come to court and then having to rule on their cases. We just talked about two examples of the problems we have. You know, the bottom line is there has to be a better way. I promise you, Kevin Brackett is going to tell you about that better way. He is going to solve our problem in South Carolina. We've looked at how other states pick judges. But the most important thing to do is we need to make sure that we have, and I guess this is the last slide, Shay, an independent judiciary. We need to have a selection process where judges are not completely beholden to legislators. We need to create an independent budget process for the judiciary, an independent budget process. And we need to have a better funded judiciary. They are underfunded. That's why they said they should be standing here with me, echoing everything that I've said today. And finally, I'm going to give you the Pascoe solution. Actually, that was the second to last slide. Don't show the last one. This is my solution. I think it's time, and this isn't very popular, but I think it's time that we have properly elected judges in South Carolina. And maybe not for all of them, but for most of the judges' positions. You know, I don't know. We got to do something different. And I think it's time we have publicly elected judges. And Kevin and I have a best friend, Scarlett Wilson. She's a solicitor down in Charleston. And recently she was with a judge. And real recently. And out of the blue, Scarlett just said, Jimmy, she said, you know, to the judge, I think we just ought to elect judges by the people now, popularly elected judges. And the judge scoffed at her and said, so you think I need to raise money and that I have to put up a yard sign? And Scarlett said, yep. So because of that, when she told Kevin, me, and some others that were on the text chain about that, I was going out of town. And every time I either go on vacation or if I'm visiting my son who's in the Air Force out in California, or I'm in North Carolina or Georgia, I took pictures of judges' signs and I text all of them and I said, the reason I'm doing this, guys, is because I want to sit down with that judge and give him some ideas. You guys have been awesome. I'll stick around and answer any questions you have. I'll even stay a little bit after 8. Thank you all for your time. I'm going to go get a plate now. And Kevin's going to listen to me lick my fingers like this.